Welcome to rSlash Idontworkherelady, where an entitled Karen gets slapped. Our next Reddit post is from Vagrant. This was years ago. My husband was in the army on his second enlistment, 5 or 6 years total at this point. He'd already been through a couple of deployments by this point. We were at a new base overseas, and I'd gotten a job at the after-school care facility on post. Well, his unit was getting ready to deploy for 6 months, so they were in the thick of all that. The chaplain was having a pre-deployment meeting for all the spouses to talk about the changes to expect while our spouses are deployed. From practical issues to emotional stuff to disruptions in routine. Bear in mind, this was back when if you were really lucky, you maybe got a 10-minute call from your spouse once a month. Maybe an email as well. Letters were still more common than anything. Now, both my husband and I are pretty easygoing, and we'd both been through a couple deployments, so I already knew the drill, what to expect, how to manage, etc. So I decided not to bother with the meeting. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic resource for spouses, and they would do a post-deployment one as well to help everyone transition back to a normal life with their spouses, but I didn't feel the need to attend. A couple of days later, my husband shows up at my workplace and tells me he's been ordered by his lieutenant to bring me to the spouse meeting. This was a second lieutenant who was fresh out of OCS, was not prior enlisted, and my husband had socks older than this guy's terms of military service. For those who don't know, a second lieutenant is the lowest ranked officer. They're the noobs, and it's very common for them to think they know it all and act accordingly. This guy was one of those. I was highly peeved, but not for one moment did I blame my husband. I could tell he was annoyed as well, and I knew that since it was a direct order that he had to obey it. I thought for a minute and asked him to hang on a minute so I could talk to my boss. Now, school was set to let out soon, and they needed me there because of adult-to-child ratio requirements. But I explained the situation to my boss and told her I'd be back as soon as possible. She understood the situation and said she'd fill in for me till I could get back. She was cool that way, and everyone on base, if they weren't military, was the spouse of one, due to being an overseas base. So they all knew and understood when stuff like this came up. Very rarely you'd get a random GS employee civilian on post, but yeah, that was highly unusual. So I left with my husband, but instead of going to the chaplain's meeting, I told him to take me to the building where the second lieutenant was. He knew what I was up to and happily complied. I arrived at the lieutenant's office, knocked, and went in while my husband stood in the hall. I asked him why he'd ordered my husband to fetch me from my job that I was needed at. He rather pompously mansplained to me that this was a required function, and that I needed to attend. Oh, I let him have it. I didn't raise my voice much, but I informed him in no uncertain terms that he had no authority whatsoever to order me to do anything. I was not in the military, not subject to his whims, and while he may be able to order my husband to come get me, he could not order me to go to his meeting. He tried interjecting at this point to say that I needed to go so that I would learn stuff about how to handle my husband being on a deployment. At this point, I nearly blew my top. I've spent more time with my husband being in the field and on deployments than you've spent in the military. My husband doesn't own me, he can't force me to do anything, and neither can you. I will not be attending this meeting, and you will not force my husband to take me there. I'm going back to my job, and if I hear that you tried to make his life miserable because of it, so help me, I will go up your chain of command and make sure you regret it. Now, the building wasn't full, but it wasn't quite empty either. Oh, and the higher-ups were in their offices pretty close by. They were super cool cats. My husband might have been enlisted, but they respected the work he did and he respected them. And this lieutenant had been getting on their nerves as well. So yeah, they absolutely could hear what was going on, and I'm sure they enjoyed it. By the end of my tirade, the second lieutenant was nearly falling over himself to apologize. "Sorry, ma'am. I apologize, ma'am. It won't happen again, ma'am." He knew he was in the wrong, and by this point he also knew I'd make a right royal stink if he tried to make me do anything, or tried to punish my husband for my actions, or lack thereof. I left and my husband took me back to my job, grinning like a fool. I was still pretty enraged at this point, but was cooling off pretty rapidly. For a few weeks afterwards, I actually was concerned that there might be fallout from my husband because of what I did, but there wasn't. At least, no more than the usual BS he dealt with on a daily basis. It was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. Like I said, I'm pretty laid back normally, but I'll get steamed on other people's behalf. The problem is that I almost never have the opportunity or the right to get involved, and I recognize that sometimes doing so would definitely make bad worse. So having this opportunity was just golden. Our next Reddit post is from Bad Karma. This happened a few years ago. My friend and I decided to hit up GameStop to see if there was anything worth buying. I just happened to be wearing a polo shirt and had a lanyard with an ID around my neck because I just left the office. This kid comes up to me in the Xbox section and asks me if a certain game is available for PS3. He must have been about 12, and me, knowing a fair bit about video games, I happen to know that yes, this title was available on multiple consoles. I went ahead and answered him in the affirmative. Yes, this title was available for PS3. He simply says, "Get it for me." I pause and look down at this kid. "Excuse me?" "Get it for me. I want to buy it." I tell him, "How about you go get it for yourself? The shelf is right there," and point off into the distance. I start to turn away, and he forcefully demands again that I get him his stupid game. I went ahead and kneeled so that I was eye level with him and told him, "If you want that game so bad, walk your little butt over there and pick it up yourself. I'm not your dog." The kid runs off and gets his mom. My buddy and I are having a good chuckle at this. We get our games and head off to stand in line. While we're making our way through the line, here comes the kid again with his mom in tow. This GameStop is attached to a bookstore, so I guess mom decided to let GameStop babysit her little hellspawn while she snuck off to look at 50 Shades of Lame. Mom is throwing a fit at the front, saying that some employee told her child to walk his fat butt over to a shelf and get a game himself. And she demands that the employee is fired. Right about now, my buddy and I are stepping up to the register to pay for our games while mom and her kid are looking for said employee. The kid looks up at me and goes, "That's him!" Mom just explodes on me with a ton of vitriol. She's gonna have me fired and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, my buddy and I are cracking the F up. He's telling me stuff like, "Oh no, you're gonna get fired, dude," or asking the person ringing us up if we can have my employee discount before I'm terminated. This circus is only causing me to laugh harder, which in turn is making her even angrier. In the midst of me on the verge of tears from laughing, this lady losing her cool, and my buddy goading this woman on further, and screwing with the GameStop employee asking me for my employee discount, the manager comes up front and asks what's going on. The lady explains how I was rude to her son and I refused to do my job, how I used foul language at her child and I was very unprofessional. She wanted me gone, etc., etc. The manager looks at me, looks back at the lady, at me, back at the lady and tells her, "Ma'am, he doesn't work for GameStop." Dead silence. My buddy then speaks up. "So I take it that's a no on his employee discount." OP, your friend seems like a hell of a wingman. Our next Reddit post is from Goblin Queen Forever. Okay, so this only just happened a few hours ago and I still have a bit of an adrenaline rush, so bear with me. As everyone is bound to know, shopping lately has been a little hectic. The mass crowding has gotten better now that there are limitations on how many people can enter a shop at one point, but everyone is still pretty stressed out and all dolled up in their lovely, fashionable face masks. All that being said, there is no excuse for what this woman did. I live in England, and over here, we have a certain big supermarket store with a burgundy/orange themed uniform. So after finally getting through the queue into the store, I grabbed a cart and I was off. I was there for maybe 20 minutes when I rounded the condiments aisle and caught what happened. First, there was a woman, younger looking, maybe a teenager, who was wearing an orange jacket, but it looked like one of those bright neon tracksuit ones, not the uniform, crouching down on her knees looking through whatever was on the lowest level, and she was wearing AirPods. Next, there was an older woman. Not a Karen in the typical haircut, overweight, overdressed sense, but she did have that face. That "I'm too important to be kept waiting, serve me now, peasant" face, and no mask, standing behind this clearly oblivious girl. She had to have been trying to get her attention before I even walked into the aisle, and for some reason, the moment I appeared, she snapped. I'll never know what possessed her, but this older lady actually reached down and grabbed the younger girl by her underarm, yanking her up to face her. This girl reacted, as I believe many people would. Without even asking questions, she yelped, spun off balance, and clocked Karen right in the face. It was glorious. The woman's nose started bleeding, and the young lady was just standing there in shock. Someone loudly announced they were going to get an employee, while I put myself between the Karen and the young girl, fearing the older woman may try to retaliate. The girl looked dumb with shock. Meanwhile, Karen started screaming. I didn't really catch what she was saying in the haze of it all, but I know a bloke behind me was shouting back at her, telling her she shouldn't have grabbed the girl and that it was her own fault. More screaming, then the employee showed up. From there, it was just a matter of getting everyone's stories. Pretty much everyone who stuck around saw Karen grab the girl first, so Karen had no leg to stand on, though it didn't stop her from demanding the police be called and that she was going to press charges. The police had already been called by a manager, and us witnesses were asked to stay and wait for them. Some couldn't, as they were with their families and such, but I, having nothing better to do, stuck around. At this point, the girl had calmed down and was just kind of standing there silently while the woman continues to scream about pressing charges and suing and firing someone. While the manager just kept repeating things like, "She doesn't work here, ma'am. Please calm down, ma'am." The police questioning was actually pretty fast, if boring. Not at all as interesting as it is in the movies. I didn't get to see a grand parade of Karen being dragged away in cuffs, sadly. Once all the statements had been taken, both women were escorted outside by police, and that was pretty much the end of it for me. I did still see them in the parking lot speaking to different officers, but couldn't get close enough to hear anything that went down. I made sure the police in the store had my number, just in case, finished my shopping, and then went home. It's been a few hours. It was surreal, and I'm actually kind of hoping it ends up on YouTube in the next few days. So there's my story. Hope it entertained. Our next Reddit post is from Hysterical Realist. A few weeks ago, I was visiting my local big box store looking for good clearance items before the store closes permanently. The dead mall it was attached to is being demolished. The store has no dress code, but the employees do wear lanyards, and I wasn't. So I was browsing around my preferred sci-fi section when I realized I needed to use the nearby restroom. So I headed in that direction, which happened to also be next to the mid-store customer service counter. Karen notices me, positions herself directly in front of me, and blocking my path to my urinary destination.
"I don't know why you don't keep that desk staffed, but I really need your help finding my book. Are you going to help me or not?"
"Not," I say, remembering the urgency of my business, and I step around her with a variation of, "I don't work here," continuing to my destination, thinking that'll be the end of the encounter. It's not to be. I hear her voice rising in pitch and volume on its way to full Karen Banshee, as she literally follows me into the men's room, and I'm convinced she was about to grab my arm and pull me around to face her. Being conscious of social norms about public exposure, I made it into a stall and locked the door for privacy. That didn't stop her from knocking on the door and threatening to get me fired before she heard the really solid stream hit the water and, I'm convinced, realized for the first time what it was she had done. I heard her embarrassed sounding squeak/huff and she hightailed it out of there. I finished my thing and washed my hands and came out to witness her being escorted out of the store by a properly lanyarded employee. I only caught the tail end of the conversation where Karen stated that she was never coming here again. And the employee had a classic response. "Neither am I. We're closing." Down in the comment, Il Capitan has this contribution. "I would have just pissed in a urinal and made eye contact. Assert dominance. She would have been the one in trouble as she was in a men's restroom." And then Turtle Rabbit replies, "Even better, wait for Karen to grab your arm and spin you around to face her. They always do. Then just continue calmly peeing on her leg." Our next Reddit post is from KR Chrome. "I was doing some late night shopping on a Sunday night in Walmart when this woman comes up to me.
"Excuse me, I need help finding these items."
She shoves a list to my chest. "I'm sorry, miss, I don't work here." I think that was the wrong thing to say as she just explodes on me.
"BS, don't be lazy, you're in the uniform."
My shirt was the same color as a Walmart employee, but I was not an employee. It's the same color, but I repeat, I'm not an employee. I can't help you.
"F you, you lazy F. Get me your manager. I'm going to get you fired."
I decided to just walk away. She yells and tries to chase after me, but I keep running until I lose her. Then I go and pay for my things. Now, a week later, I was told I would be interviewing someone who was applying for the secretary position in our company. So I go to the interview room and call in the applicant. I look at the picture on the application form and my eyes widened. It was the same woman who harassed me in the Walmart. Oh, now this was too perfect. She came in, saw me, and gasps. "Take a seat, please," I said, and she sits down looking pale. Oh, I was going to enjoy this, but I conducted the interview as professionally as possible. I made it very painful for her. Eventually, I asked her, "So, if someone came up to you and asked for help in a place you didn't work, then you told them you didn't work there, and then they yell at you, and then they harass you, and then they come to a job interview, and you were the one interviewing them, what would you do? Would you give them a job?" She did not get the job, and I got some payback. This story is more like rSlash I don't work here lady, but I do work over here. That was rSlash I don't work here lady, and if you like this content, then check out my podcast where I publish the exact same videos but in podcast form. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day.